You asked, so I'm gonna answer, because long floats in stranded color work seem tricky. Like they're gonna be hard to manage. But the truth is, managing these floats is surprisingly simple. So hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a thumbs up, and let's learn how to capture floats like a pro. Welcome. If you are new to my channel, my name is Carrie Craft Geek, and this is where I talk about making pretty things with pretty string, normally with 2 sticks. And some of my favorite pretty things to make with those 2 sticks is stranded color work. I'm surrounded by a lot of it here today. One of the things that I absolutely love about stranded color work is that it's not just beautiful on the outside, it can also be beautiful on the inside. I mean, it's just like so gorgeous with these wonderful tidy floats. Now, a lot of stranded color work projects, especially ones that are found in the Fair Isle tradition, usually have a lot of small floats. They're not difficult to manage. However, there are many times in stranded color work where you get floats of yarn that have to travel across 5 or more stitches. And that's when managing your floats can get more tricky. If you have a really long, loose float on the back of your work, it can create tension issues, it can become a snagging hazard, and worst of all, they might start showing to the front of the work. And that's when we need to start employing trapping techniques in order to make those long floats smaller and more manageable. So in today's video, I'm going to cover how we capture our floats if you hold yarn in both hands while working stranded color work. Then I'm going to cover how to capture floats when you hold both yarns in just your right hand. And at the end of the video, I'm going to look at how and when to plan for capturing floats, plus some bonus tips on alternative techniques. Now, if you are a continental knitter, you might be going, but what about me? Aren't you going to show how to capture floats if you're a continental knitter holding both yarns in your left hand? No, I'm not. And this is where I have to humble myself and admit that even though I can knit continental, I am not an expert at knitting stranded color work with both yarns in my left hand. There are frankly better videos from people who do this all the time, and I'm going to link to one of them up here and down in the show notes in the description box. Hey, Ed and Carrie here. Small correction to what I just said. If you are a continental knitter, I am going to be showing a technique called the Afterthought Capture, which works no matter how you hold your yarn, so you may still want to check that out. As always, I have timestamps down below, so you can skip to that section if you want. Also, I highly recommend checking out the end of the video when I talk about planning for trapping floats and alternative techniques. Also down in the description box, you will find materials and resources that I think are useful from today's video. Some of these will have clearly marked affiliate links. If you click on one of those links to do some shopping, I earn a commission, and this helps support my channel. If you utilize one of these affiliate links, thank you so much. It is so greatly appreciated. Okay, with all that said, let's dive in and start looking at how we capture floats. So, I've got my little sample project here, and it just so happens I'm on a row where I'm going to need to capture some floats. It's right here in this section. I'm going to knit 7 stitches in my main color, and I'm going to capture my stitch on stitch 4, so it's right in the middle of the long float. So I have my contrast color, which is floating, in my left hand, and I've got my main color, which is the working yarn, in my right hand. I'm just going to knit 1, 2, 3 stitches. I'm now halfway through where this long float is happening, so this is where I'm going to capture my float. The way I'm going to do this, when the yarn I need to capture is in my left hand, is I'm going to enter the stitch as if to knit. I'm going to bring the left yarn over my needle. I'm then going to wrap my right yarn, and then I'm going to just knit the stitch. And my main color will slip right under the contrast color. And now my contrast color is sitting on top of my main color. And then I'm going to knit with my main color, and that's going to complete the trap. And this is what it looks like. All right, this little float right there, it's going right over the purl bump, is now trapped. I'll show you that again because I'm gonna get to a second spot on this row where I'm gonna have to do the same thing. 1, 2, 3. I'm now gonna capture my float. So again, I'm gonna enter the stitch as if to knit. I'm gonna bring my needle underneath the floating yarn. I'm going to wrap the yarn that's on my right hand, and then I'm going to just draw the working yarn through the stitch. So this is like the easiest float to capture because you're able to just draw your working yarn right underneath that captured float. So that's it. That is how you capture the float when it's in your left hand. Now let's look at how to do this when the yarn that you need to capture is in your right hand. So for demonstration purposes, I've switched yarn that I'm holding in either hand. So my main color is now going to be in my left hand, and my contrast color is going to be in my right hand. So 1, 2, 3. Here's where I need to do my capture. So again, I'm going to enter my stitch as if to knit. This time I'm going to take the yarn in my right hand. This is the yarn that I'm floating that I need to trap. I'm going to wrap it around my right needle. I'm then going to wrap my left yarn over the needle. And then I'm going to take my yarn in the right hand and I'm going to take it off the needle. And I'm going to just finish the knit. When I do that, the yarn is now trapped. I'll show you that again when I get to the next trap location. All right, here I am, ready to trap my next float. I'm going to enter my stitch as if to knit. I'm going to wrap my floating yarn around the right needle, and then I'm going to wrap my working yarn around the right needle. I'm then going to take my floating yarn and take it off the needle so it now is crossing in front of my working yarn. I'm going to finish the stitch. And just like the show everybody's hate watching right now, I am all done. So that is how you trap yarn when you have yarn held in both hands. And as you can see, how you trap the yarn is different depending on whether that floating yarn is being held in your left hand or in your right hand. Now, it's not always true that the float that you have to capture is going to be the main color. It's just often true, which is one of the reasons I like to hold the contrasting color in my left hand, because it's easier to trap floats with yarn held in your left hand than it is in your right hand. But there are definitely times where it is the main color that I have to trap, and so you need to know how to do it for both your left and your right hand. Now, even though both yarns are going to be in my right hand, I still keep them separated, one yarn to the left of me and one yarn to the right of me, to keep my yarn from twisting, or at least hopefully keep it from twisting. Things happen in life. So now that I have both my yarns here set up in my right hand, I have my main color is closest to me and my contrasting color is farther away from me. But here's the good news when it comes to this technique I'm going to show. How you capture the float is virtually the same because I'm going to do the same maneuver regardless. But let's first look at doing this with the yarn farthest from you needing to be captured. Again, I have to carry this float across 7 stitches, so I'm going to trap it at the 4th stitch. And at the stitch where I'm going to do the capture, I'm going to enter it as if to knit. I'm going to pick up my contrasting color, my floating color that I need to trap. And notice that it almost is coming underneath the working yarn. So my floating yarn, I'm going to wrap clockwise, going over the top of the needle, clockwise around the needle. I'm going to pick up my working yarn and wrap that counterclockwise like I normally would. And then I'm just going to pull my working yarn through the stitch. And boom. Knit my next stitch, and my float is trapped. So let me show you again how I trap that float. See, if you're used to me knitting, you might be noticing that I use a overhand grip when I'm doing this. Let me know if you want me to do a whole video on how I knit color work as a English thrower. I will be happy to do that. But we are here at the next float. I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna work into this stitch. I'm gonna pick up my floating yarn and I'm going to wrap it around my needle. Oops, did it the wrong way. When I wrap this float, I need to make sure I wrap it clockwise, not counterclockwise like we normally do. We need to do it clockwise or this won't work. Then I take my working yarn and I wrap it counterclockwise as I normally would, and I bring the, oh no! This is something that happens quite frequently. You can end up pulling both strands through accidentally. It's not a big deal. I'm just gonna take my left needle, pick up that floating yarn, take it off the needle, and then boom, and it's fine. So if you accidentally pull both strands through, don't worry. Just use your left needle to take it off your right needle, and it will be fine. And you will still have a beautiful float at the end. What about if I need to trap the strand of yarn that is closest to me? Well, I am going to show you what it looks like, but the maneuver is exactly the same. Well, almost exactly the same. There's one small detail to pay attention to. Here I am, and I'm ready to trap my float, and I've got this yarn closest to me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my forefinger and I'm going to bring it underneath my working yarn. I'm going to grab the floating yarn so that it comes underneath the working yarn. That's really important. This won't work if you don't bring the floating yarn underneath the working yarn. And then again, I'm going to bring that floating yarn clockwise around my right needle and then pick up my working yarn and wrap it counterclockwise. And then I'm going to just pull the working yarn through the stitch. And kind of the way to make this a little bit easier so you only bring the working yarn under is to kind of like keep this float pretty loose so that you can just sort of work that just the working thread through. So when you are capturing floats and both yarns are in your right hand, there are two keys to making it work. One is to make sure that you're bringing that floating yarn underneath your working yarn. And the second is that you wrap the yarn clockwise over the needle. So you're going over the top of the needle instead of underneath and back around. You do those two things and you will be able to capture your floats beautifully. Sometimes it has happened to me, I have forgotten to trap a float, or I threw caution to the wind and decided, I'm not gonna bother trapping this float. I think it'll be fine. And then when I got to the next row, I was like, that was a mistake. I should have trapped that float after all. Did I have to go and unpick my work and get back to that spot so that I could trap the float properly? No, I did not. I could utilize a technique called an afterthought trap. The great thing about afterthought trap is that when you first work your row with the long float, you just let the float be free and you just create the long float and then you trap it on the very next row. So here I am, and this is really where I could have trapped the float on the previous row. I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to enter the stitch as if to knit, then I'm going to take my right needle and I'm going to pick up that long float. Then I'm going to just work my stitch through the float and the stitch, and boom, I have trapped that long float. One of the great things about this technique is it works the same way whether you're holding yarn in your left hand, your right hand, or both hands because you're using your right needle to pick up underneath that float and then knit your stitch. There are people, in fact, who use this technique as their main way of capturing floats. And if this is what you want to do and what's going to work best for you, I highly encourage you to use whatever technique works best. I don't personally gravitate towards the afterthought technique because, well, frankly, I'm that knitter that actually forgets to do the afterthought every time. It just flies out of my mind, and it's easier for me mentally to capture my floats as I make them. But if you want to go with the afterthought, this is a great way of capturing floats as well. There's really two important rules of thumbs when it comes to figuring out when and where to trap your floats. One, you want to trap floats that are going to go across 5 or more stitches or an inch behind the work. Any float that's longer than an inch, it's a pretty good idea to go ahead and trap that float. The second rule of thumb is you don't want to stack your capture. Take this sock, for example, that I designed. There's actually 2 rows in a row that has a long float that needs to be trapped. I have the chart for this color work here, and you can easily see where those 2 rows are. However, if I were to capture the float at the midway point at both rows, which would be right here, I could run into a problem. It can create a tension problem, and it's very likely those trapped floats will start to show to the front of the work. So there's kind of 2 options to deal with avoiding stacked traps. One is if the trap is just over 2, maybe 3 rows, take your color work chart and you look at where you're going to have to trap floats on multiple sequential rows and mark where you want to do those traps so they don't stack on top of each other. So for this pattern here, my first row, I would actually probably trap a float here, like my 3rd stitch in here, right? And then on the next row, I could trap a float right in the middle. So this kind of system works great when you have long floats over 2 or 3 rows of knitting. But what if you have to trap floats across 5 or 6 or more rows of knitting? Somewhat similar to this pattern here. There is a whole section of floats that have to be trapped throughout. In that case, I actually recommend utilizing a technique that I absolutely love called ladder back jacquard. I have a whole video about it. I will link it up here and down in the description box below. But this is what it looks like on the back when you utilize ladder back jacquard. You'll see that there are these sections of knit stitches. Right? These are actually floats that have been trapped. And how you do this is so shockingly straightforward. Like, my mind was blown when I first saw it because it looks like, oh, this must be so complicated to do. And it's really not. Again, I have a whole video about how to do this if you're interested in this technique. If you have any questions about what we've covered today, please let me know down in the comments below. I love answering questions and helping other knitters out. And again, this video was in response to a viewer request. So if you have any requests for videos about stranded color work or anything with knitting, I would love to hear about it down in the comments on this video, or you can go to the community tab on my channel page. I now have a community tab where not only can I post to you, but you can also post to us, and we can have a little bit more of a social interaction right here on YouTube. So absolutely love hearing from all y'all who've watched and enjoyed these videos in all the spaces possible. I hope that you enjoyed today's video and you got some great information out of it. If so, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your other yarn wrangling friends. Liking, sharing, commenting, thumbs up, all of the different interactions really shows YouTube that this is a space worth checking out, and it helps me grow this channel so I can stay here on YouTube. If you'd like to take your support just a little bit further, you can always utilize one of my affiliate links when you're doing some shopping so I earn a small commission, or leave me a tip through a YouTube Super Thanks or buy me a coffee. If you utilize any of these extra means of support, thank you so much. It is so greatly appreciated. And if you can't, I totally understand. Of course, the free, always available way to support my channel is to hit subscribe and the notification bell. All right, that is it for me. I hope that you have a wonderful day, evening, weekend, weeknight, whenever you might be watching this. And as always, happy health and happy making. Bye.